nearly everyone. Let's get straight to CNN's Athena Jones at the White House, where the American flag is flying right now at full staff. Athena, explain what's going on there and what that means.
Hi, Dana. Well, we have asked the White House, we've been asking since early this morning when we noticed that the flag had been raised. We asked why was the flag raised? It had been lowered to half staff over the weekend after the death of Senator McCain, and we know that it was raised just a couple of minutes after midnight, 12:02, early this morning. That flag was raised, even though the flag at the U.S. Capitol remains at half staff. We've asked, as I said, the White House, we're still waiting on an answer as to why they made that decision. And this comes after we're also learning from a source familiar that White House aides had prepared what is being described as a fulsome statement for President Trump on the death of Senator McCain, a statement that mentioned his accomplishments and his lifetime of service. We understand that statement had gone through the White House approval process and that several staffers believed that it would be released on Saturday after McCain's death was announced. That's not what happened. The Washington Post says that Chief of Staff John Kelly, White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders, and others urged the president to put out a statement calling McCain a hero and praising his extensive service. Well, the president said instead he wanted to put out a brief tweet. That tweet offering condolences to the McCain family, offered his deepest sympathies and respect to the family of Senator McCain, saying our hearts and prayers are with you. He issued the same statement on his Instagram page with a picture of himself. But I should mention that others in and around the White House, First Lady Melania Trump, Ivanka Trump, Secretary of Defense Jim Mattis, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo have issued fuller statements praising McCain's service. And one more thing I want to note here, Dana, at the end of that pool spray, we call it, when the reporters were allowed into the Oval Office to hear the president's announcement about this preliminary agreement with Mexico, he was asked several times by ABC reporter Jonathan Karl to remark on McCain. He asked, any thoughts on the legacy of John McCain? These were shouted questions, clearly within earshot of the president. He declined to use that opportunity to talk about McCain and his service. Dana?
Athena, thank you. Look, I wanted to get this news in because it's important. He is the commander-in-chief. He is the president. The flag issue could be fixed with the stroke of a pen, a presidential proclamation, which is standard operating procedure when a sitting U.S. senator, never mind somebody with the patriotic and heroic background of John McCain, and he hasn't done it. So we'll see how that plays out. But I also want to note that from now on, we're going to talk about John McCain and his legacy and not about this pettiness, frankly, that we're seeing from the White House. And on that note, we're going to learn more about the funeral memorial services planned for Senator McCain. An aide for McCain tells CNN that former Vice President Joe Biden will speak at the funeral service for the late senator in Arizona on Thursday. The two were very close friends for almost half a century. Biden's son, Beau, suffered from the same type of brain cancer as McCain. I want to go straight to CNN's Stephanie Elam in Phoenix. Stephanie, what else do we know about plans to honor and mourn the senator?
Well, Dana, you've spoken so much about how Senator McCain really believed that at the end of the day, all of the politicians, they're all Americans and that they should reach across the aisle more so. And we know that he planned what he wanted to have happen for his funeral, for how he is memorialized. And you can see that playing out in what's going to happen over the next 5 days, starting here in Phoenix and state capitol, where he will lie in state beginning on Wednesday, which would have been the senator's 82nd birthday. Then on Thursday, what you're talking about, how he will be memorialized at the North Phoenix Baptist Church, where former Vice President Joe Biden is expected to speak. And then on Friday, the senator's body will make its way to D.C., where he will lie in state at the U.S. Capitol, followed up by Saturday, where he will have a funeral at the National Cathedral. This is where we expect to hear from former Presidents George W. Bush and former President Barack Obama, where they are expected to eulogize the senator there before there is a private memorial at the U.S. Naval Academy in Annapolis. That's for the family, and that's where he will be laid to rest.
Stephanie, thank you so much, and thank you for all of your amazing reporting out there, literally around the clock. Appreciate it. Joining me here at the table to share their insights and reporting, CNN's Phil Mattingly, Molly Ball from Time Magazine, Bloomberg's Toulouse Olorengapa, I'm going to get that right one day. And Michael Shear from the New York Times. As somebody who's called Dana all the time, I apologize.
No problem.
It has been a long few days. Well, first of all, thank you one and all for coming here. I want to start with a really great interview that our colleague John Berman did this morning with Patrick Kennedy, former member of Congress, of course, son of Ted Kennedy. And he talked really eloquently about the relationship, but also about what John McCain and his late father symbolize when it comes to what's right and what should be done in the U.S. Senate.
And my father genuinely loved and respected John McCain. It's an example of what we need today, again, and that is that even though they disagreed, they were always searching for ways to put their country ahead of their party. And it sounds so trite, but no, not at all. In these days that we're living in, we really need people to have that as their goal.
It's not trite. It's reality, and you see it in the halls every single day, Phil.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting as you kind of watch the old guard or the old bulls or however you want to refer to them kind of leave the United States Senate, as we've seen too frequently over the course of the last 10 or 15 years. It's this reality of it's different now than it used to be. And obviously nostalgia is a wonderful drug, and we can all say it was better back when. But now if you look at the legislative priorities or even the legislative schedule, it's about scoring points. It's about making sure your party's going to do better in the midterms. It's about making sure the president's agenda is going to move through. I'm not saying that wasn't always the case, but there's a difference in the way, and you can attribute it to campaigning or fundraising or any of those things that we've all talked about ad nauseum over the course of the last couple of years. There's a difference in the way senators interact with one another. There's a difference in the way that they have relations with one another, and I think there's a major difference in the way in which they take up legislation and work with one another. It's a very top-down approach now. It's the idea that rank and file or committee chairs aren't necessarily working behind the scenes to try and figure out the path forward. And I think what's most interesting is McCain was very complex. Your documentary laid this out extraordinarily well. He was not a perfect man. He acknowledged that openly. He was infuriating to people on the opposite party and his party. Senator Mitch McConnell, you were at the HBO showing in the U.S. Congress where McConnell said that he once told his wife about McCain that he believed that his captors in Vietnam were still going through group therapy. That's how frustrating that he could be. But at the same time, McCain, unlike a lot of lawmakers now, was able to still make deals, still negotiate, still talk to the people that he could frustrate and enrage at times. And I feel like that, more than anything else, has been something we haven't seen as much of in recent years.
Yeah, I mean, when people talk, that to me is what's so important about the example of McCain and what we don't see in the Senate now. It's not just about bipartisanship. You don't have to cross party lines if it's not what you believe in. But McCain, when you talk about McCain or Kennedy being a lion, it's a sense of bigness, a sense that being one of only 100 senators in the entire country, you have a real job to do. You can do big things. You can accomplish major things. If you're Joe Biden, you know, you can actually create and pass big pieces of legislation that change the way the country functions. Instead, a lot of the senators now seem like drones who just vote the way the party leadership tells them and don't feel like it's their job to actually start stuff and have ideas of their own and be independent. And you see this with, you know, a lot of them seem to be looking around, either putting their finger in the political wind or just waiting for someone else to start the ball rolling instead of really taking that upon themselves.
Right, and putting their finger in the political wind because, look, to be fair to the people who are in office now, Kennedy and McCain in particular, they were giants, and they had a lot of running room because they had a lot of support back home. And happened to the junior senator from Arizona, Jeff Flake. It's not that he is not a conservative, but the big reason why he decided not to run again is because he was probably going to lose the Republican primary because he didn't have that running room and he had the same sensibilities as McCain. So that begs the question, can there be, I mean, there will never be a John McCain, but can there, the people who he took under his wing, Chris Coons of Delaware, Amy Klobuchar of Minnesota, and others, and this is on the Democratic side, never mind the Republican side, can they live up to that standard, even remotely?
Well, it's going to be incredibly difficult for them to live up to that standard, in part because we do live in this tribalized moment in history where people realize that if you do go against a member of your own party, if you do speak out against the president, then you're likely to get a tweet attacking you or have a primary opponent who could end your political career.
And McCain had tweets and attacks all the time, and
right.
he just
And he
You have to have,
he
you
stood
know,
up to that.
armor, right.
And he put out some of the most clear statements when the president did something that he was against. Whereas you hear from other members of Congress, I didn't see that tweet, or I'm not sure, I don't have a comment yet, and you sort of see them looking for political cover and looking for someone else to step out and speak out first. But McCain was always willing to sort of put his stake in the ground and say, this is what I believe, this is what I stand for.
Michael, you and I covered the McCain 2008 presidential campaign together. The mother of a service member who was killed in Iraq, Matthew Stanley, we heard McCain talk about him over and over again. The mother's name is Lynn Savage. She was on CNN today, and I want you all to listen to what she said about McCain.
He called me in the morning and he said that, good morning, Len. This is Senator John McCain, and I'm just calling to see how you're doing today. That was it. It's plain, simple. We chatted for a couple of minutes, and that was it. How thoughtful. A man with a busy schedule taking a few minutes out to speak to me.
And we remember that Senator McCain wore Matthew Stanley's bracelet, and he talked. It was one of the lines, that, I mean, we can make